This week on Africa Weekly, we take a look at the legacy of America's first black president on the African continent as he steps down from 8 years in office. Then we head to southern Madagascar, where the World Food Programme says close to 1 million people are facing starvation. And finally, we end in Gabon, where construction of the Oyem Stadium continues, even though the Africa Cup of Nations is already underway. But first, a summary of the stories that made the headlines this week. Gambia's new president, Adama Barrow, has been sworn in as the country's new head, even though defeated veteran leader Yahya Jammeh refuses to recognise him as the winner of last month's election. Thousands of regional troops have entered the country to pile pressure on Jammeh to hand over power. The situation has sparked a major crisis, with 45,000 people having fled to neighbouring Senegal. Tourists, vital for the tiny country's economy, have also been evacuated. But despite the unrest, opposition supporters celebrated in the streets on Thursday night, cheering the new president in exile. The Nigerian Air Force dropped 2 bombs on a camp where tens of thousands of people were seeking refuge from Boko Haram. At least 70 people were killed when the jet bombed the town of Ran, sparking widespread condemnation from organisations working to address a growing food crisis in the war-torn region. More than 70 people died in a suicide bomb attack in Mali, targeting militia groups committed to restoring peace in the African country. The assault targeted a camp housing former rebels and pro-government militia who were signatories to a 2015 peace accord which struck with the government. In response, the president has ordered 3 days of national mourning. Ivory Coast's government pleaded for calm as deadly protests by angry security forces and troops spread across the country. A mutiny among troops over pay erupted at the start of January. Initial protests were quelled, but more soldiers have since taken to the streets to demand similar bonuses. Heavy snow trapped around 1,000 motorists in northwest Tunisia, with heavy blizzards from Europe sweeping the Mediterranean country. Many motorists stayed trapped in their cars overnight. Winter snowfall is not unusual in the North African country's highlands, and forecasters say cold temperatures are set to stay for at least another week. The Museum of Islamic Art in Cairo has reopened 3 years after a car bombing partially destroyed the building. The museum, which boasts about 100,000 relics, holds one of the largest Islamic civilization collections in the world.
The United States' first African-American president, a powerful symbol for the world and especially for Africa.
Hello, everybody.
Obama made 4 visits to the continent during his 8 years in office, starting with Egypt and Ghana in 2009. He spoke about Africa rising, encouraging a new generation to be optimistic about their future.
I wanted to be here because Africa is on the move. Africa is one of the fastest growing regions in the world.
And they loved him for it. Crowds lined the streets and filled halls and stadiums. In Kenya, they painted buses in his honour. In South Africa, thousands braved torrential rain to hear him speak at Mandela's memorial service.
He has a resemblance with Mandela. I like the fact that he reminds us of Mandela.
After we have spoken, I saw that I can go. I've only came for Obama's speech.
As well as words, there were practical contributions too. Obama launched Power Africa, a multi-billion-dollar plan to double electricity output across the continent by 2030. And he set up a US base in Niger to tackle terrorism in West Africa. But it was always going to be hard for his actions to live up to the sky-high expectations.
It was more of an emotional thing than anything else. There was a lot of hysteria, attachment, because he's one of us. But in terms of tangibility, economic tangibility, there's not much.
As Obama steps down, he's promised to spend more time in Africa, a continent that's been inspired by his words, but disappointed by his actions.
In In the bone-dry climate of southern Madagascar, food and water are scarce. An ongoing drought means residents of the town of Anjapali are never sure where their next meal will come from. The only plant that grows is the cactus, its red fruit the only food available. But it's not enough to live on.
We don't eat anything but leaves and red cactus fruit. My daughter only ate that and she couldn't bear it. She began to lose weight and strength. Then she had diarrhea and vomited at the same time. That's why she died.
A rare burst of rainfall fills the dry potholes. The muddy water's not fit to drink, but with the only safe drinking water several kilometres away, residents say they have no choice but to chance it.
It's with this water here that we prepare food because there's no other water than this. We give it to our children. When there's no water, we can't make food. If this water isn't here, we can't live. This water makes us sick, but we have to drink it because it's all there is.
With a lack of jobs and a crumbling infrastructure, many have fled southern Madagascar to escape a life of hardship. The World Food Programme says close to 1 million people face starvation here. And in Anjapali, known locally as the capital of hunger, those who remain are reliant on food aid.
People who are already poor have to share the small amount of food they receive with their families. It's not distributed properly. They send donations to the Anjapali district just once a month. If there was at least 1 or 2 distributions a week, it still wouldn't be enough, but at least there would be something to eat.
The WFP says it needs $30 million of additional funds to be able to feed the region's inhabitants. Without that, many more could find themselves wearing the black ribbon of mourning.
In northern Gabon, a shiny new building rises above the jungle. Oyem Stadium was built to host games during the Africa Cup of Nations. But on day 1 of the tournament, construction was far from finished, with jackhammers and workers greeting football fans at the gate. And local residents who expected the new structure to bring water and electricity have been disappointed.
For me, AFCON, that stadium, is a source of pride, not just for OEM, but also for my village, because that stadium is in my village. But we're angry, because none of what they had promised us has come true.
Inside the stadium, things are not much better. Several coaches have complained about the condition of the playing field.
This is the first time that I've seen speed bumps on a field. I mean sleeping policemen. If a quarter of the field is covered in speed bumps, it doesn't make for a very fast game.
Although the builder says the stadium is 95% complete, he also says several more months will be needed to finish it.
After the AFCON, work will continue and all the villages around the stadium will have water and electricity.
By that point, the fate of the 20,000-seat stadium is unclear. Oyem only has 60,000 residents, and during the first games of the tournament, barely half the seats were filled.
After years of disappointment, Senegal have reached the quarter-finals of the Africa Cup of Nations. Tunisia are also well placed, but Algeria and Morocco's qualifications are at risk after disappointing starts. Morocco may be able to pull it out of the bag thanks to the expertise of French coach Hervé Renard, who has won the last 2 tournaments with Zambia and Ivory Coast. Next week, we take a ride on Morocco's classic mopeds, which are still spurting along despite an invasion of cheaper Chinese imports. That's all from us at Africa Weekly. Until next week.